Grass can be a little bit of a tricky thing to paint because it relies a lot on texture. You also have to have at least some sense of how land sits, how to create depth and ridges. Like a lot of things in landscapes, grass is made up of 3 layers. A dark base color, then a mid-tone texture color, and finally the brightest highlight color. When painting grass, I'd recommend using a flat brush, and the older and more ratty the bristles are, the better. The base color you put down is going to be the darkest shadow color of your grass. If you're doing grass that's a little bit further away, mix in a little bit of blue into your green. So this base color is where you're going to establish the shape of the land. It doesn't really matter if you tap this in or if you use brushstrokes to do this. Just make sure any visible brushstrokes follow the direction of your land. That's going to be mostly horizontal or a little diagonal, nothing up and down. Now you have to make sure that first layer is completely dry before you move on to adding texture. Now, making grass texture takes a little bit of practice. First, don't put a lot of paint on your brush or you'll get a big glob when you touch the canvas. You want to tap the tips of the bristles gently into the paint and then tap the canvas gently to create this kind of rough, uneven, grassy texture. If you notice, my brush bristles are barely bending at all. It's a very gentle touch. If your entire brush hits the canvas, you are tapping way too hard. When you have less paint on your brush, that's when you'll get these softer, more transparent marks. And that's the kind of texture you want to put in those darker areas that get less light. When you're tapping in this texture, it's important that your marks follow the lay of the land or follow the angles. Because he's painting a hill, he angles all of his brushstrokes to follow that hill. It wouldn't look right if the brushstrokes were horizontal. So your texture color is probably going to be just a little bit of yellow and white added to your dark green. And you can use a smaller flat brush for distant areas. When you get into areas that are closer to the viewer, you want to switch to the bigger flat brushes because that will give you more texture. After you tap in your texture, then you're going to switch to your highlight color, usually adding more yellow and more white. You want the bristles to spread out a little bit further here and tap even more gently so that you're getting that scatter effect. A lot of artists like using a fan brush at this point because it's easier to create those spread out speckles. And mostly concentrate your highlights on the tops of ridges that would be hit by the light. It's important to leave a little bit of dark in between each ridge, otherwise all the highlights will just blend together and you lose that depth. This is a really good thing to use a reference picture for, so you're not trying to guess where these ridges should go. It takes a while to get the hang of it. Keep the brightest highlights in the foreground. The further away things go, the less bright highlights get.